The hospital at midnight always carried a strange kind of stillness, one that felt like the world was holding its breath. But on this night, the stillness was shattered by alarms blaring from Trauma Room 6. Nurses rushed past with frantic urgency, doctors barked orders, and the floor trembled beneath hurried footsteps. 22 doctors had already taken their shot at saving the young woman on the table, and every one of them had watched their efforts dissolve into despair. Her name was Lily Hartman, brilliant neurology student, beloved daughter of Thomas Hartman, the hospital's biggest donor. But none of her achievements mattered now. What mattered was that her heartbeat had stopped. And nobody could bring it back. The air in the room grew heavier with each ticking second. There were IV lines tangled like abandoned vines, syringes rolling off metal trays, sweat dripping down surgeons' brows. The lead doctor, Drive Kensington, slammed his gloves against the counter, his eyes bleak. "We've lost her," he said, voice trembling with exhaustion and frustration. "Time of death," but he didn't finish the sentence. Because outside the glass wall stood a man who had stopped dead in his tracks, gripping a mop so tightly his knuckles turned white. His gray coveralls hung loosely on his lean frame, and his boots were worn down from years of walking the same sterile halls. His name was Ethan Cole, night shift janitor, single dad, invisible to everyone except the few people who took the time to notice. But despite the uniform, despite the mop, despite the label the hospital had given him, his eyes were not the eyes of a man who belonged on the sidelines. They were the eyes of someone who recognized what was happening in that room, and who knew something the others didn't. Ethan stepped closer to the glass, heart pounding. He didn't intend to watch. He certainly didn't intend to interfere. He'd spent years forcing himself to fade into the background, because stepping forward, showing who he used to be, had led to nothing but pain. But when the youngest nurse burst into tears and stumbled out of the room, Ethan couldn't pull himself away. He could see it, the subtle angle of her chin, the swelling around her neck, the faint discoloration near her ribs. He recognized it instantly. He had seen it in battlefield tents, in broken-down villages, in the arms of soldiers who clung to their last breath. Airway trauma, incorrect positioning. The medical team was fighting the wrong enemy. His heart twisted violently. He hadn't felt this kind of surge in years, not since the night he lost his wife, Emily, in an accident where he failed to save the one person he loved most. He had walked away from everything after that, his certifications, his training, his identity. He became a janitor because it was the only place where nobody asked him to save lives. But tonight, someone needed him. And the thought of doing nothing felt like a betrayal of every life he had saved before, and every life he had failed to save. Ethan pushed the door open. "Hey," a nurse cried, "you can't be in here." But he didn't stop. His voice came out calm, steady, almost frighteningly controlled. "Her airway is collapsing," he said as he approached the table. "You're ventilating the wrong angle." "Doctor," Kensington snapped, "excuse me. Who the hell do you think you are?" Ethan stepped beside the girl, ignoring the stares, the outrage, the disbelief. "Tilt her jaw," he instructed softly. "Not back. Up. You're closing her throat when you push." The anesthesiologist's breath hitched. "He's right." Kensington glared. "He is a janitor." "He's right," the anesthesiologist repeated, louder this time. Ethan reached for the laryngoscope, and the room tensed. "Put that down," Kensington barked. "You are not trained for." Ethan snapped the tool open with expert precision, and the click was unmistakable. Not the clumsy fumble of a janitor picking up something unfamiliar. This was muscle memory. Years of training, years of doing this under pressure far worse than this room could imagine. The staff looked at each other, stunned. Ethan took one slow breath, then spoke with a quiet authority that cut through the chaos like a blade. "If you walk away," he said, "you lose her. If you let me work for 30 seconds, you might get her back." That single sentence froze every person in that room. Kensington clenched his jaw. 30 seconds, he said tightly. Not one more. Ethan didn't waste a heartbeat. He repositioned Lily's head with a precision none of them had attempted, then slipped the scope into her throat. The swelling was worse than he expected, nearly blocking the airway entirely. "There you are," he whispered, locating the passage. Then, with a single, Decisive motion, he opened the path. Monitors flickered. A nurse gasped. The flatline trembled. Ethan placed his hands over her sternum and began compressions, not the typical rhythm, but a modified protocol used in field trauma to preserve brain function under airway obstruction. Charging paddles. Someone shouted. Clear. Electricity surged through the girl's body. A long moment passed. Then, beep, beep, beep. Weak, trembling, but real. She's got a pulse. A doctor cried. She's breathing. My God, she's breathing. Ethan stepped back, chest heaving, sweat dripping from his brow. He had saved her. He actually saved her. For the first time since Emily's death, Ethan felt his knees go weak, not from fear, but from relief. From release. Before anyone could speak, he turned toward the door, wanting nothing more than to fade back into his old role, pretend this moment never happened. But he didn't make it 3 steps before running into a man with tear-streaked cheeks and trembling hands. Thomas Hartman, Lily's father. He grabbed Ethan's arm. Who are you? Ethan swallowed, his voice barely a whisper. Just the janitor. But in that moment, everyone in that room knew that was no longer true, and maybe it never had been. Part 2. Ethan expected punishment. He expected reprimands, accusations, the full weight of the hospital's policies to come crashing down on him. What he didn't expect was the board calling an emergency meeting, with him at the center of it. Rumors spread like wildfire through the corridors. Nurses whispered about the janitor who knew more than the experts. Surgeons grumbled angrily, defensive of their pride. Young interns spoke his name in awe. But Ethan didn't want any of it. He wanted to clock out, pick up Grace from her friend's house, and forget that he had stepped into a world he had sworn never to return to. Instead, he found himself escorted into Conference Room 3, facing a long table filled with hospital executives, legal advisors, Drive. Kensington, several trauma specialists, and, at the far end, Thomas Hartman. The room fell silent when Ethan entered. He took a seat at the far corner, intentionally choosing the chair closest to the exit. Before anyone else could speak, Drive. Kensington slammed his file shut. This is absurd, he snapped. He violated protocol. He endangered the patient. Thomas raised a hand, silencing him with a single gesture. Then he stood and addressed the room. My daughter is alive because of this man, he said. And before any of you speak again, I want to know, who trained him? Ethan looked down at his hands. He didn't want to answer. He didn't want to revisit the memories he buried. But the truth hung in the air, and lies felt impossible now. I was a combat medic, he said quietly. Search and Rescue Division. I specialized in airway trauma under extreme conditions. The room stiffened. Kensington scoffed. So what? That doesn't make him a doctor. It makes him the only person in that room who understood what was killing my daughter, Thomas shot back. Don't confuse rank with talent. Kensington reddened, but said nothing. Thomas turned to Ethan. Why are you working as a janitor? Ethan hesitated. The truth was painful, but withholding it felt heavier. My wife died in a crash, he said softly. I couldn't save her. I tried. He swallowed hard. After that, I couldn't keep going. The pressure, the memories, I just needed something simple. Something where nobody depended on me. But someone did depend on you, Thomas said gently. Your daughter. Ethan's chest tightened. Grace is the only reason I'm still standing, he whispered. Thomas nodded with understanding etched deep in his eyes. Ethan, he said, Lily is awake. She wants to meet you. Ethan froze. I don't want to intrude. You saved her life. There is no intrusion. They walked to the recovery ward. Lily lay propped up with pillows, her face pale but glowing with fragile life. When her eyes landed on Ethan, she gasped softly. You're the man, she whispered. The one who didn't give up. Ethan felt something crack open inside him, a part of his heart he thought had turned to stone. I just did what I could, he murmured. No, Lily insisted, her voice trembling. Everyone else stopped. You didn't. Thomas placed a comforting hand on his daughter's shoulder, then turned to Ethan with a seriousness that made the room feel smaller. I want to offer you something, he said. Ethan braced himself. If it's about legal issues, I understand. I'll sign whatever. Thomas frowned. Legal issues. He shook his head. Ethan, I want to sponsor your return to medicine. Ethan's breath caught. What? Full reinstatement, Thomas said. Certification, schooling, licensing, whatever you need. I'll pay for everything. You have a gift most doctors only dream of. Hiding it is a loss for the world. Ethan staggered back slightly. No, I can't. I have Grace. Her school, her life, and if you accept, Thomas said softly, your daughter will grow up watching her father become the man he was always meant to be. Ethan felt tears burn behind his eyes. He had spent years believing he wasn't enough. Not for his wife, not for medicine, not even for himself. But now, with one life renewed because he stepped forward, the possibility of who he could be flickered back to life. That night, he came home late. Grace sat on the couch, waiting for him with her legs tucked under a blanket. Daddy, she said with sleepy eyes, everyone at school said you saved someone. He knelt beside her, brushing her hair back gently. I did something, he whispered. And something happened back, something big. Grace smiled softly. Mom would be proud of you. The words broke something open inside him. He pulled her into his arms and held her longer than usual. In the months that followed, Ethan took the leap. With Thomas's sponsorship, he completed accelerated training, passed reinstatement exams, and shadowed some of the best trauma surgeons in the nation, many of whom silently envied the instinctive genius he carried. The hospital that once saw him as a janitor now relied on him in crisis after crisis. Nurses whispered with admiration when he walked by. Doctors consulted him. And every week, Lily visited Grace, two girls bonded by a miracle neither fully understood. As for Ethan, he became more than the man he once was. Not just a medic, not just a father, but someone who proved that even when life drags you into the shadows, one moment, one choice, can bring you back into the light. And every time he saw a janitor mopping the floors, Ethan made sure to stop, look them in the eye, and nod respectfully. Because he knew better than anyone, sometimes the person the world overlooks is the one who saves it.